Hello everyone and welcome to Fandoms Assemble, where we'll be breaking down content from all your favorite fandoms, from the Marvel Universe to Harry Potter and the wider wizarding world, Disney, Pixar, Star Wars, Game of Thrones, and really whatever else this golden age of IP decides to throw at us next. My name is Steve Oborn Jr. and I'll be your host as we embark on this journey through the magic of modern day media. I'd like to take a moment to thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending a portion of your day with me, and I hope you find this pod to be both entertaining and informative, but most importantly, a satisfying resource for all those who love to think way too hard about our favorite movies, books, and television shows. If you're like me, you run to the Reddit boards and Twitter feeds after that latest episode drops and you're already Googling Easter eggs on the ride home from the movie theater. I'm here to tell you that that's okay. There are others of us out there, and I hope that Fandoms Assemble can be the arena where all that beautiful obsession can live and grow. Let's get to it. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Episode 1. Now, before we get started, I'd just like to let this audience know that I am unapologetically the CEO of standing for Steve Rogers' Captain America. So when Disney Plus announced that they were going to have a slate of Marvel television shows, this was by far the one that I was most excited for. Probably will be my favorite Marvel television show of all time, lest we see a Steve Returns the Infinity Stone show at some point in the future. Now let's get into the breakdown of the episode. So we open up episode 1 with Sam Wilson, aka the Falcon, preparing, as we later find out, to return Captain America's shield to the Smithsonian. As he's ironing, Sam thinks back to his last conversation he had with Old Man Steve after Steve gets done returning the Infinity Stones in the time heist at the end of Avengers Endgame, in which Steve asks him, as he's turning over the mantle of Captain America to Sam, how's it feel? To which Sam says, it feels like it's someone else's. Now, this is going to be a recurring theme, I feel like, in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where Sam doesn't feel he lives up to the mantle of Captain America. Other than myself, Sam Wilson is the #1 fan of Captain America. Going back to when they first met in Winter Soldier, after Steve got done kicking his ass running around the mall, Steve and Natasha need Sam's help. When Sam volunteers, Steve says, Sam, I can't let you fight again. You just retired from military service. Sam replies, what better reason to get back in than Captain America needing my help? Now Steve Rogers has been the driving force for Sam Wilson to be a part of the Avengers this entire franchise. So where do we find Sam Wilson 6 months post the events of Avengers Endgame? In the same place we found Steve Rogers after 70 years in the ice, back in the fight. Sam Wilson is now a contractor for the U.S. Air Force in his brand new Stark Tech Falcon suit with the comic books paint job, kicking ass and taking names. His first target, shout out to Bartok the Leaper. Last seen in Captain America and the Winter Soldier aboard the Lumerian Star, you remember him as the only guy who gave Cap any kind of fight in that scene, is now the head of the LAF. As far as I know, the LAF do not have a grounding in comic books canon, but First Lieutenant Torres, keep an eye on this guy, folks, doesn't seem to think that they're the big bad in all this, but we'll get back to that later. Sam flies aboard the plane where they're keeping Captain Vassant, and they've already killed the pilot. After having Red Wing, shout out to Red Wing, the coolest robotic sidekick in the entire MCU, cut open a hole in the side of the plane, Sam kicks everybody's ass, blows up about 6 helicopters, and returns Captain Vassant safely to the ground. Sam then meets with First Lieutenant Torres in some sort of bazaar, where him and Torres discuss the LAF and the Flag Smashers, who Torres is secretly keeping tabs on via some weird internet app. Sam's approached by a gentleman who thanks him for saving his wife's life, although she was blipped and Sam was blipped, so it's really odd that she would thank Sam, but hey, I guess it's just a blanket thank you to the Avengers. Sam then heads to DC for quote-unquote moon stuff, which again we find out is Sam returning the Captain America shield to the Smithsonian. At the Smithsonian, Sam gives a eulogy-like remembrance of Steve Rogers, and the symbol he meant to the United States is Captain America, but he says it's just that, a symbol, and this shield was more about the man who wielded that symbol. Sam then echoes those same sentiments to Rhodey, who questions him on why he didn't take up the mantle of Captain America when that's what Steve wanted. But again, folks, Sam does not believe that he is worthy of the mantle of Captain America. Cut to the Winter Soldier storming through a hotel, killing his targets in one of the cooler fight scenes we've seen from this character in the MCU, then killing an innocent bystander who we later find out to be Yori's son. Bucky awakes in a cold sweat, clearly a nightmare, sleeping on the floor, and a callback to the conversation that Sam and Steve had about soldiers returning home and the bed feeling like a marshmallow. Bucky is then in therapy, which is apparently a condition of his pardon. I don't know how after the events of Avengers Endgame there can be any conditions to a pardon. But we find out Bucky has a list of amends, starting with a Senator Atwood. A process in which he needs to find the individual and 1, do nothing illegal. 2, make sure no one gets hurt. And 3, tell them I am no longer the Winter Soldier, I am James Bucky Barnes, and you are part of my effort to make amends. Tongue-in-cheek to rules number 1 and 2, we then see the interaction with Senator Atwood, where Bucky absolutely murks the guy in the passenger seat. After which, we find out through conversations with his therapist that Bucky is not returning Sam's texts. A dangerous position for a guy who finds himself with no friends, no family, and for the first time in his 106 years of life without a fight. Bucky then leaves therapy and meets up with Yori Nakajima, an elderly gentleman who Bucky has lunch with every Wednesday. After ribbingly setting up Bucky with the bartender, Yori goes into a story about how his son was killed abroad, the same son that we saw in Bucky's nightmare. Please, Bucky, please, never tell this man that you killed his son as the Winter Soldier. But more importantly, why doesn't the bartender or Yori recognize Bucky Barnes? More on that later. Back to Sam Wilson we go, driving an old pickup truck through New Orleans to Wilson Family Seafood, where him and his sister Sarah argue about selling the family's fishing boat, citing financial troubles post-blip. Now, I just need to take a minute here. Between Wanda driving a Buick in WandaVision and Sam driving this truck, why don't the Avengers have any money? I understand later in the bank scene we touch on the fact that Tony Stark apparently wasn't paying these guys. But Sam can't get a shoe deal? He can't start a clothing line or some other business where he can benefit from the context and the celebrity status that being an Avenger brings him? I mean, I don't want these guys to go full Homelander or anything, but come on! Back to Bucky, who shows up to his date with the bartender with flowers, just the sweetest old-fashioned gesture you ever did see. But again, this woman doesn't recognize Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier. She doesn't recognize him. Sam gets recognized in a bazaar in the Middle East, but Bucky can't get recognized in a bar in New York City. And when asked how old he is, Bucky says 106, and she looks like he's joking. She also makes mention of his gloves under which he's hiding his robotic arm, obviously. Now, I love the moment where he tries to stop the mechanical arm on the cat. I love the metaphor there in which no matter how hard he tries, he's not going to be able to stop that mechanical arm, his own mechanical arm, his own history from interfering with his life. So after some beers and Battleship and finding out that Bucky has a sister, had a sister, the conversation turns back to Yori and his son, and Bucky flees back to Yori's apartment, where he sees the photo in the background on the shrine that Yori has, and he can't bring himself to tell Yori that he murdered his son. He can't bring himself to go through that process of making amends, and I hope he never does. Bucky, please, please do not break this man's heart. Yes, he needs to know how and why his son was killed, but you are one of the few people he has left in this world. Please do not break this man's heart by telling him that you murdered his son in cold blood. One quick stop at the Wilson family home where Sam and Sarah discuss getting a small business loan before we find First Lieutenant Torres at a Flag Smashers meet. Asking around on what they're supposed to be doing, Torres then finds himself in the middle of the chaos of a bank robbery. The central figure, could this be Zemo, clearly is a super soldier, puts an absolute beat down on Torres and leaves him lying in the street. To the bank we go, and what is a continuation of the excellent job the MCU has done at black representation and what it means to be black in the United States of America. Sam and Sarah find themselves in front of this absolute doofus of a bank manager, a total Avengers fanboy, who's asking Sam's for autographs and selfies, when at the same time turning them down for their small business loan, citing the absolute bullshit, apologies for anyone listening with kids in the car, excuse of Sam not having any income while he was blipped. Are you kidding me? The guy died trying to save the universe. He then brought half the universe back, or was at least part of the team that did so, and you won't give him a small business loan because your underwriters can't get their head around the risk of writing a loan for an Avenger with government contracts? Sarah then calls him out directly on his bullshit on what is a complete double standard. There's absolutely no way that Steve Rogers goes in and gets turned down for a bank loan in this place. This idiot then goes and asks for another selfie. Outside the bank, Sam and Sarah are arguing, discussing what a figure their father was in the community and how it's ridiculous that they can't get a loan to save his fishing business. Now, who was Sam and Sarah's dad? Little background research shows that Mr. Wilson was a preacher in New Orleans who was killed trying to break up a fight between rival gangs. I don't know if that's the way the MCU is going to go. They just referenced him way too many times in this story for it to be some obscure fight, less it was a fight involving other characters and it wasn't really rival gangs. Now, in the credits, we see a reference to a subject 02656, which a little internet search shows that may be a reference to the first Black Captain America, Isaiah Bradley. After Steve went into the ice in the 40s, this isn't the first time that the United States government tried to resurrect the symbol and activate Project Rebirth to get a new Captain America. But is that man going to be Sam's father? I guess we'll have to wait and see. Shortly after that conversation, First Lieutenant Torres calls Sam to tell him what was going on with the Flag Smashers, in which we get a tantalizing open-ended statement, which I believe should have ended with the word super soldier. Torres says, "You don't think he could be a super soldier?" Yes, Torres. Obviously, he's a super soldier. He kicked you halfway down the block. Sam and Torres' conversation is then interrupted by Sarah, who directs him towards the television where an unnamed government official is giving the announcement that the U.S. government is resurrecting the mantle of Captain America, that they are choosing, the hell's his name, John Walker, to be the next Captain America. Not Sam Wilson or Bucky Barnes, two of the modern-day Howling Commandos, but John Walker. This Disneyland remake, Joffrey Baratheon-looking dude, whose helmet doesn't fit. Yes, I'm sure that was on purpose. But his helmet doesn't even fit, and he's standing there. The dude hasn't even said a line yet, and I already hate him. Anyone, all my friends on the East Coast who go to Disney World, unfortunately, thanks to a screwed up arrangement they have up with Universal, they can't have the Avengers in the park. But I was fortunate enough to go to Disneyland a few years ago, and they do have the Marvel characters in the park, and they're building the Avengers campus. And when I tell you, when you walk up to T'Challa, to Spider-Man, yeah, it looks just like him. When you walk up to Captain America, this is a doofy looking dude, and a helmet doesn't fit, in a suit that's way too big, and that's the guy they casted for Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This is honestly ridiculous. As I said, I am Captain America's #1 fan, and I am insulted that in episode 1, they give us this clown. But more on that later. As I said in the intro, we're striving for Fandoms Assemble to be the #1 resource on the internet for all those who love to think way too hard about our favorite movies, books, and television shows. To try and honor that promise, here are the top 5 questions from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, episode 1. Question number 1, why aren't Sam and Bucky talking? We find out in Bucky's therapy session that he's not answering any of Sam's texts. Last we saw these two, they were lakeside with Wanda Maximoff after Tony Stark's funeral. And yes, immediately after that, they did go over to Old Man Steve, where he made the choice to make Sam Wilson the next Captain America versus Bucky. But that doesn't explain, all of the teasers and trailers leading up to this show posed it as a buddy cop, lethal weapon type gig. And this is before we find out at the end of the episode that the U.S. government has turned the shield over to John Walker. So for how long hasn't Bucky been answering Sam's texts? Is he still mad about not being chosen for the mantle? Did he just find out that Sam turned the mantle over to the Smithsonian and that's why Bucky's not answering it? Or is it simply that Bucky truly is falling into a state of depression like he tried to tell his therapist, and that he just wants peace and he's just in a funk and he doesn't know how to talk to his friend who can't really understand what he's going through? This guy, unlike Steve Rogers, who was frozen for 70 years, has lived all 106 years of his life, who remembers every kill, and you can only imagine what kind of state that would put the person in when all they have to do is to sit around and think. Number 2, and we've touched on this a couple times already, but why doesn't anyone recognize Bucky Barnes? So we saw Sam Wilson is getting recognized routinely, no matter where he goes in the United States or abroad. Yet no one in this bar in New York City recognizes James Buchanan Barnes, a guy who not only has his own exhibit in the Smithsonian, but who also should be extremely famous for being an Avenger and Steve Rogers' best friend. The last time we saw post-blip reactions outside of WandaVision was in Spider-Man Far From Home, where Bucky is clearly listed in that corny montage that the Midtown Tech students made as being one of the Avengers who helped save half the universe. Based on the out-in-the-open, really lack of a secret identity nature that the Avengers take, you would think that Bucky would be getting recognized routinely, and the fact that he's not really starts to question how much he's been involved with the Avengers, apparently not at all since Endgame ended, and how involved he'll be with the Avengers moving forward. Number 3, who the hell is making more super soldiers? As we saw in Captain America and the Winter Soldier, Hydra had an entire program outside of Bucky dedicated to making a kill squad of super soldiers. Now enter this masked character from the Flag Smashers, and apparently he's a super soldier too. I mean, I gotta tell you, if I'm Bruce Banner, I gotta be pissed. Yes, pun completely intended for someone whose primary superpower is getting super angry. However, he's supposed to be one of the greatest minds in the world, working with the greatest minds in the world, and the one time he tries to replicate the super soldier serum, he turns into the Incredible Hulk. And that's not to mention the Abomination, Red Hulk, and the other number of Marvel comic book characters who tried to replicate Erskine's original serum to devastating effects. Now, I'll be interested to see if this central figure of the Flag Smashers is indeed Zemo from Captain America and the Winter Soldier, who was teased heavily as being the central villain in this series. But the last time we saw him, he didn't have super soldier abilities. He was just a regular guy with an agenda from Sokovia who was destined on tearing apart the Avengers. We also hear that whoever the villain's mission is in this series wants to make superheroes non-existent, and that definitely doesn't fit in with the mantra of the Flag Smashers, who are anti-nationalists. Question number 4, who is John Walker? Now, I'll give this guy a little bit of a break before I go in on him anymore. I mean, he hasn't even said a line yet, and nor do I want to front-run the show by giving away any spoilers that are going to be key to his character development. But just know that there have been many iterations of John Walker over the run of Captain America, all ranging from straight-up villain to doofy stopgap, in between a time where Steve Rogers, Bucky Barnes, or Sam Wilson was going to pick up the mantle. And last but not least, we have question number 5, who are the Flag Smashers? In order for Fandoms Assemble to truly be the #1 resource on the internet for all those who love to think way too hard about our favorite movies, books, and television shows, we can't just ask life's great questions, we gotta answer a few of them ourselves. So, sharpen those pencils, crack open those textbooks, engage your heads-up display, and join us for Fandom Academy, Lesson 1, The Flag Smashers. We know as far as the MCU goes from Falcon and the Winter Soldier Episode 1, the Flag Smashers are a group of post-blip anarchists who are hell-bent on bringing the world back to the way it was before the Avengers defeated Thanos in Avengers Endgame. They are in search of a world without borders, anti-nationalists who also have a grounding in comic book canon with a singular character, the Flag Smasher. We first meet the Flag Smasher in 1985's Captain America 312 by the name of Karl Morgenthau. The son of a Swiss banker and diplomat, Karl became a supervillain after his father was trampled in a demonstration outside the Latvian embassy. Yes, I said Latveria, that was not an error. In the Marvel comic book canon, Latveria is a fictional country which is ruled by Dr. Doom. And his anti-nationalist agenda made him the perfect foil for Captain America all these years, who literally drapes himself in the flag that Karl Morgenthau vows to smash. Now, in the comics, the Flag Smasher does have a group of individuals who are willing to take up his cause called Ultimatum, the underground liberated, totally integrated, mobile army to unite mankind. Man, you gotta love Marvel's acronyms. But lest we throw another acronym for a bunch of people who are never going to have a business card to show anyone, the MCU appears to have rebranded these folks the Flag Smashers, plural. One of the more relevant storylines that appears to Falcon and the Winter Soldier involves the Flag Smashers and Ultimatum, and is centered around a plot in which they capture current Captain America, John Walker in an attempt to release an electromagnetic pulse that would render all electronic machinery on Earth virtually useless. Now, in the comics, this plan goes down because the Flag Smasher teams up with John Walker after finding out that Red Skull had actually secretly funded Ultimatum's operations. Red Skull, obviously the symbol for Nazi Germany and, inherent nationalism, which strongly conflicts with the Flag Smasher mandate, which leaves Karl Morgenthau no choice but to sabotage his operation. Now, as Red Skull is currently sitting in Vormir guarding the Soul Stone, it's unlikely that the MCU is going to take this route. However, it'll be interesting to see if John Walker indeed does get captured by the Flag Smashers, given he looks like an absolute doofus, and what role Bucky and Sam play in his release. A secondary storyline involving Karl Morgenthau as the Flag Smasher centers around the Roxxon Oil Corporation, a regular in the Marvel villain universe who you may remember from Marvel's Agent Carter on ABC. Roxxon actually gives the Flag Smasher his superhuman strength in an attempt to level the playing field with Captain America and the other Marvel superheroes. Now, as Roxxon has not yet appeared in the MCU, and it appears the Flag Smasher already has his superhuman strength, it's unlikely that we'll see that storyline progress. But it'll definitely be interesting to see if the MCU turns the Flag Smasher into Helmut Zemo from Captain America and the Winter Soldier, who the Disney Plus teasers all projected to be the primary villain in this series. Last time we saw Helmut Zemo, he was being arrested by T'Challa for the murder of his father and taunted by Everett Ross, CIA agent and fantasy favorite Martin Freeman, aka Bilbo Baggins. But I don't think there's anyone who actually watched that stinger who didn't immediately go, well, Zemo's going to escape. After they had him in the Winter Soldier box, Ross is taunting him just like every other naive prison guard or law enforcement official, whether it's Jason Statham's Shaun Fast and the Furious or Lex Luthor in the Justice League. Anytime that trope is used, that prison wall will almost immediately be blown down with the criminal escaping. In fact, this happened in Black Panther to Everett Ross with Ulysses Klaue when Killmonger comes in to rescue him from custody after Klaue was arrested for trying unknowingly to sell a brick of vibranium to the CIA. Now, whether the Flag Smasher turns out to be Karl Morgenthau or it actually turns out to be Zemo, I'm sure we're in for one hell of an action-packed series, watching that character square off against Super Soldier himself, Bucky Barnes, as well as Sam Wilson the Falcon, and hopefully the future Captain America. So that'll do it for our first iteration of Fandom Academy. I hope you found that segment to be informational while also quelling some anxiety and boosting your excitement for what's to come in this series. For our last segment, here's some rapid-fire Easter eggs that you might have missed. While the running joke of WandaVision was the length of the credits with the lack of information, Falcon and the Winter Soldier could not be further from the case. Most of what we see is Cap imagery, Steve Rogers imagery, Falcon, Winter Soldier, broken logos, excerpts from the Sokovia Accords, Winter Soldier trigger words. But if you were as tinfoily about this stuff as I am, you would have noticed that in the split second before they rolled the names in the credits, they had some really cool information in there. Number 1, a reference to Agent Number 13 of S.H.I.E.L.D. and later on a picture of Sharon Carter, Peggy's niece and Steve's former love interest, and a total badass who I can't wait to see what they do with in this series. Also over blip headlines with a reference to the Power Broker, another villain in the Marvel Comics universe. Then we have a string of seemingly meaningless government literature, one of which, though, has a reference to Madripoor, an X-Men reference, which is an island in Southeast Asia with strong ties to the X-Men's Wolverine. Now, with the Quicksilver pump fake in WandaVision, is there a chance that we see another Mutants reference here in Falcon and the Winter Soldier? I guess we'll have to wait and see, but that'll do it for this episode's Rapid Fire Easter eggs that you might have missed. If you've made it this far, I'd just like to thank you again for spending a portion of your day with me. If you enjoyed the pod, please subscribe, rate, and review on whatever your preferred podcast channel is. If you have family, friends, a dog, a neighbor who enjoys the Marvel Universe and who is excited for Falcon and the Winter Soldier and want to learn more, it is your obligation to share this Fandoms Assemble episode with them. And lastly, for more on this episode, more Fandoms Assemble content, go to @FandomsPod. Please subscribe and follow on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Folks, again, this is your host, Steve Oborn Jr. I'd like to thank you for listening. I'd also like to take a moment to dedicate this podcast to my father, Steve Oborn Sr., who we lost this past February to cancer. I'd like to apologize to my wife, my mother, and loved ones listening, and anyone else who's going through similar struggles for this unexpected break in the levity of Marvel superheroes. But I really wanted to take a few minutes in this first episode to tell you all a story. One of the last conversations I had with my father. We were discussing what's important in life, where careers take us, and how we prioritize things. And he said, man, you got to get to a point where you stop answering someone else's call and you got to start ringing your own bell. And when I tell you several months later, I still wake up with that thought in my head. That's the reason why we're here. It's the reason why you're listening to this pod and why I created Fandoms Assemble, because there's times in all of our lives where we make sacrifices and compromise based on, what other people think we should be doing. And we don't go out and ring our own bell. We don't stop and think about what we're actually good at, what we enjoy, and the things on a day-to-day basis that bring us joy. And while by no means am I going out and quitting my job and diving headfirst into Fandoms Assemble and becoming a full-time podcaster, I hope that I can provide as good an escape for all those listening as it is for me making it. And who knows, over time, with the continued support of all you listening and the community I hope that we create around Fandoms Assemble, maybe this could turn into something more than my wildest dreams. But until then, in honor of my father and the idea of ringing your own bell, at the end of every episode, you're going to hear this sound. And I hope it serves a reminder of two things. One, call your parents, call your loved ones. Please tell them you love them. And two, make sure you're taking a step every day of doing something that gets you in the direction of doing something you love. Something that makes an impact and something that truly brings you joy. And do it on your own terms. Thank you again, folks. Thank you for listening to episode 1 of Fandoms Assemble. Please come back next time. We'll be covering Falcon and the Winter Soldier, episode 2. Until then.